Hello, beautiful people. Once again, we are going to talk about swooshes or swishes or swipes or comma strokes or whatever um, everyone's calling them. I don't think there's a standard name for different ones, but I'm going to do my best to help you, those of you that are struggling with this. And I understand that this is probably the hardest thing that you'll come across in dotting. Once you get over this hump, you're home free. Um, and it's just like with anything. I don't want to drill you down with practice, 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 but it is. And what happens is it will become part of your muscle memory. What I want to avoid is you having bad habits and practicing those bad habits over and over again so that you develop the wrong muscle memory. That's not what we're going for. So, the key with your swooshes is consistency. And I don't just mean paint consistency. I'm assuming that everyone is using Deco Art Americana, with the exception of one of you I know is using Arteza, and we've already talked about paint consistency. You are going for something resembling a runny egg yolk. You want the paint to, and this is Deco Art, you want the paint, when you lift up on it, you don't want a peak to be left behind. You want the peak to melt back into the paint quickly. If it sits there for a minute, your paint is too thin, especially for swooshing. If anything, you want to err on the side of thinner paint for swooshes. And there's some things you can add to your paint to help with that, even to your deco art, but I'm not going to get into that today because you guys are all super beginners, and I don't want you having to go out and think you need to buy another product when you don't. So this is just straight up deco art. Now, after deco art sits for a while, after you've opened it, or even before your first time opening it, if it's been sitting on the shelf, it will tend to get a little thicker, in which case you may need to thin it down some with a pouring medium. That's not the same as the Liquitex gloss medium. Liquitex gloss medium is not designed to thin your paint. It will really not change the consistency much because it's pretty thick on its own. So I'll put a link in the comments under this video of a product if you want that you can get that will help you, I'm sorry, that you can use to thin your paint. But you're looking for a pouring medium, anyone will do. And quite honestly, you can make your own pouring medium using school glue, the white glue, and just mix it equal parts glue and water, and that makes a perfectly fine pouring medium. In fact, many of the pouring mediums smell like glue in the bottle, so there's no need to rush out. And I know a few artists, and I mean artists, not artists on steroids, that only use glue and water, and they use cornstarch to thicken. They don't go out and buy all this fancy stuff. So that's something that you can use, that you can grab at Walmart or wherever, a big bottle of just the white glue, not the gel or anything fancy, just your OG, your old fashioned white school glue. 50 parts glue and water. Okay, so when I say consistency here, I'm assuming you've already got your paint consistency down because we've talked about that in previous lessons and videos. I'm referring to the amount of paint on your tool. needs to be the same for every swoosh in a particular pattern. It doesn't have to be the same for every swoosh you ever do, but if you're working on a particular pattern, you want all your swooshes to be the same in that pattern. I've got a fruit fly I left some potatoes out and all hell broke loose. So you want the amount of paint on your tool to be consistent. You want the amount of pressure that you're applying in your swoosh to be consistent. And you want the speed with which you do the swoosh to be consistent. And I'm referring specifically here to the swooshes that you do just using a ball stylus, not a sharp tool in addition. I'm going to work with you on both in this video, but these three things I'm talking about when it comes to doing a single swoosh with a ball stylus. So let me show you what I mean, and then maybe that will make more sense. So I've got some deco art. I'm using my white tool. I tend to go for the white tool a lot, the big end, when doing my swooshes. I just find it to be a pretty good size to handle. It's good for getting in tight places. When I start getting out to bigger areas that I need to swoosh, I'll switch to a paintbrush. And I know that all of you that I've spoken with anyways, that's your goal, is to get to the paintbrush. So for smaller swooshes and tight swooshes, I think the white tool is a good go-to. And that's not to say you have to. I'm just saying it's a good starting point to see. And I would always start on paper first before I go to my piece to see, do I need maybe a bigger tool for this swoosh size that I'm trying to get into? I'm trying to think if I have a piece of art I can show you. Hold on. Where? Is it a normal piece or is it a jacked up piece? Oh, the one I was working with Jennifer on. Yeah. All right. So like for example, on this piece, I knew that in here I wanted my swooshes to go the length of this distance between the two dots that I'd walked around. So what I'm saying is practice on paper first to see what tool will give you the right length for what you're trying to do, how much paint it's going to take, the amount of pressure it's going to take to get there, etc., etc. All the things that I said you need to be consistent about. And then you carry that all the way around. Guidelines are critical for swooshes. I've noticed some of you that are showing me your practice work are just randomly on a piece of paper. I want you to get in the habit of drawing some guidelines, and I'll explain why that's so important in just a minute. The other thing is, I wanted to mention this. This is an MDF board that I have underneath my paper. I thought about doing this lesson using that because swooshes are so much easier on an MDF board, which is not the same as your regular wooden board. It's slicker. It's nice and slippery. But I figured that'd be cheating to do this lesson on that when most of you are still working on paper. So I'm going to do it on paper. However, if you're interested in getting some of these for practice, they're great for practicing. They also make great paint palettes. You can mix if you get into mixing colors and things like that, you can mix your paint on them. But you can get quite a few of them for like 12 bucks on Amazon. So if that's something you'd be interested in, give me a shout and I'll get you a link. All right. Rambled long enough. So back to the white tool and big end, and let's look at just a regular comma stroke. So when I push down, I'm not grinding down. I'm not pushing hard. I know some of you get your nerves and you have a tendency to vice grip your tool. Because I went so slow on that one, it didn't go as long as I would have liked. But the point of it is seeing when you go a little faster, it drops off paint faster and it'll carry a little longer. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. The speed of your swoosh matters. Let's put some more paint. Put a lot of paint on here. I'll actually, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. I'll double dot this. Now when I go, I have to carry it out. You see how I went all the way into the top up here with it. And the reason that I didn't stop short and end it the distances the other ones is because, and this leads me to what I've been seeing over and over in my beginners swoosh, early swoosh work. The swooshes are looking like this. First of all, they've got a dot at the top. I'm not even sure how we're getting it, but somehow there's a dot on the top and then something like that. Someone said today that their swooshes look like maggots, which made me giggle. That kind of looks like a maggot right there, which I don't think is probably not what we want. So here's how to avoid that. First of all, you want to carry your swoosh all the way until it runs out of paint. I don't care what else is going on. You're going to have to carry it to the end. If it's giving you too long of a swoosh, back down on your tool size, back down on the amount of paint you're using. That's why I said practice on paper before you do a particular pattern on a piece, so that you'll know, okay, this tool with this amount of paint is giving me swooshes this long and that's too long. The other thing you can do, and this is what I do, and this is what a lot of people do, if you're just trying to make a tiny swoosh so short that you can't carry your stylus to the end, say you want it to stop just about here, well, you have a problem now because the tail is not pointy, and that is not the way that they should look. You want to have pointy tails always. So what you can do is get your pointy tool. For a lot of you, that's a toothpick. We've talked about, for some of you that maybe I haven't been working one-on-one with, you may have a sharp tool. But when I say sharp tool, I don't mean your smallest stylus. I mean a sharp tool. If you don't want to invest the money in a fancy one, just get some extra long toothpicks from Amazon. You want the extra long ones so that they're more comfortable in your hand and you're not trying to do this with a toothpick. So like 4-inch long toothpicks would be perfect. And then you have an endless supply and you don't even have to worry about cleaning it. But what you want to do if you're trying to make a short swoosh and you can't get the tail with your ball stylus, so stop wherever you want it to end and then take your sharp tool and just tease that tail into a point. Okay? The other, and in fact, I'm always, when I'm doing my swooshes, I have my ball stylus in one hand and my swooshing tool, my pointy tool in the other. And I just go back and forth between them without even thinking about it. The other thing that I'm noticing, aside from the fact that the tails are not pointy, is, try to get it to, let me try to get a wonky one. All right, this to me is a wonky swoosh. Do you see how you can see the dot where I first put the stylus down? Instead of it being smooth like this one, I've got a rounded top. That's where you take your pointy tool and refine the shape using your pointy tool. And you can even come up and get, because this one didn't have a nice tail, come up and get some more paint and take it into a tail. You have so much more control with the pointy tool than just the ball stylus alone. That doesn't mean don't ever use the ball stylus. I'm just saying if you can learn how to incorporate both, you're going to have much prettier swooshes. And get in the habit of, if a swoosh isn't I don't want to use the word perfect because we're beginners and nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect, but your best work, I guess. If a swoosh is not your best that you can do, you need to get in the habit of erasing it and doing it again. You want to focus on each and every dot and swoosh being your very best work. Your work will thank you for that. And that's another reason to consider these MDF boards for practice, because you cannot erase on cardstock. I want everybody to be relaxed and enjoy the process. So if you have something you can erase your mistakes on, like an MDF board or a practice stone or whatever, you're not going to be as death gripping to your tool and shoulders all tensed up because you can't erase it. If you know you can erase it, then you can relax. It's just paint. I said to someone today, you're not inserting the codes to launch a nuclear device here. It's just paint. It's forgiving. So work on those things in your breathing. All right, so back to these. So you can also, now let's add some more paint with the same tool. So let me double dot this, really load it up with paint. Now I can get a longer swoosh. Probably can get even longer than that one. Now see, I don't like that tail, so I'm going to go to the top, grab some more paint, and extend that tail out. And if I want to make the shape a little thicker at the top, I can grab some paint out of my dot and swing some around with my sharp tool. Make it a little wider at the top. So I can get different size swooshes using the same white stylus. Now, what if we want to go around a center dot? So let me make a center dot here. So I'll make it on the bottom. I don't know. Made it in the center. And I am going to explain to you in a minute the point of the guidelines and why they're important. Right now, we're just kind of playing with the basic gist of how to swish. Okay, let me get a different color going. Still using Deco Art. Still with my white tool. So now I can look at this just from experience and guess that swoosh with one single stroke is not going to make it to the bottom like I want it to. But let me show you what I mean. See, it did not make it to the bottom. So what I can do is I can come back and get some more paint, go back to the top, never, ever, ever get more paint and start in the middle trying to rebuild a tail. You will make a mess. Go back to the top, and this time kind of push the paint along. See how I keep going back for more paint until you get to about where you want it to stop. I have room for it because it's really hard to get a pointy tail doing that. You're not going to get a pointy tail doing that, but you are going to get a nice top part of your swoosh. Get your pointy tool and finish the tail. Okay, so again, I'm going to push the paint along so that I can go the distance, but I'm going to stop short because I'm not going to make it a nice pointy tail with that much paint on my ball stylus. So I go to my pointy tool and just finish the tail. Okay, so you kind of have to have an idea beforehand of, that's why I said it's really important to practice on paper or a piece of MDF before you go and put it in your piece, so you'll get an idea. Now see on that one how I went up and got more paint, but it was just one time, so I was able to get a tail. And you'll get to where you can actually feel the paint under the ball of your tool and know, okay, I'm out of paint, I can get a pointy tail by finishing it off this time. Let me show you that again. So 2 rounds of grabbing paint, and I'm even going to go back and do it again because I don't like that swoosh. And see, I should have stopped short and done it the right way. So don't be lazy. It's supposed to be fun. Even the practice is supposed to be fun. It's all about the journey getting there. We could snap our fingers and be there. And this is a short swoosh, so I should be able to do it with just one drag. Okay. So let's look at some other tools. Let's look at the blue tool, which, as you know, is bigger, big end. I always, when I'm referring to the tools, I'm always referring to the big end unless I say otherwise. So carry it out until it's out of paint. If you keep your amount of paint on the tool, whatever that amount of paint is, if you're heavy-handed, then stay heavy-handed. If you're light-handed, stay light-handed. Whatever consistency you're going to use for one swoosh, use, not consistency, amount of paint for one swoosh, use that for all of them in that series, in whatever pattern you're working on. So I want these to all be same size and width, so I'm using the same amount of paint, same amount of pressure, and same amount of speed. And I would even come in and reshape a little bit here to make it a little fatter at the top. I'm telling you that having a pointy tool is your friend. I use mine almost constantly. All right, we did talk about teardrops in another video, but let me just show you something else you can do with the teardrop concept. So I'm using the purple swirly tool. I have no idea how many millimeters it is. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 6. It doesn't matter. You use whatever size you want for where you're trying to place it. Depends on how much room you have to fill. Okay, I'm going to go back and get a second dollop and a third. Anytime you're dragging paint from a big dot, you want to load it up good. Okay, so first, I'm just going to go straight with my pointing tool, straight up, and then I'm going to come around to the side and create that teardrop shape. You can also use this to pop air bubbles which I just did. And then on the bottom, I'm trying to make a petal, so on the bottom I want it to be a little shorter. So I started in the center, pull the paint down to the side, bring it to a point, and then fill in whatever's left. I think that's a really pretty shape that you can add to your work. And then I use my pointy tool to spread the paint around and make sure that there's no wrinkles in it that are going to dry funny, or want it nice and smooth. So that's another shape. Let's see. We can do that and swoosh around it. And now I'm just wondering if my hand has been in the way showing you these swooshes. I'm going to show you again with a different camera angle and close up. So again, extend the center with your pointy tool. Come around to the side. Merge that into your point. Come around to the other side. Merge that into your point to make a teardrop. And then do the same thing on the bottom but shorter. Make a petal. And you want to work pretty quick with something like this because your paint will start to thicken and get goopy in the drop that you're grabbing from, and it'll cause ripples and wrinkles in your element. So that's a pretty petal shape. Let me magnify and see if we can get something to the side. Bear with me here for a minute. I'm going to have to move over, I guess, because that's not holding. All right. So using that same white tool, and play with all your styluses. Use green and blue and even the pink, and get a feel for all the different size swooshes and how far the paint will carry and all of that. So now we could start up here and make a swoosh that follows the petal. Now see, I'm stopping because I don't like where that tail was going, so I'm going to stop and finish the tail with my pointy tool. And also, and if you're my student and I'm working one-on-one with you, I want to see pointy tails. And you see how this has like a round head to it? Let's take our pointy tool and round that out so that it's a nice smooth swoosh. Okay? So I put quite a bit of paint for this because it's a long travel. That time I made it all the way down. I'm still, I don't know if you can see, but it's a little wonky. I can see waves where my hand was, control was a little off. So I'm just going to take my pointy tool and even out the line. And honestly, these two swooshes in real life would bother me because they're not exactly the same. I would probably try, I would either erase this one or I would try first to go back and go over it a little bit more, but not all the way to the bottom. Yeah, it's better. And we could keep going with that. Down to the bottom and do one that way. Went back and start it over, but that one turned out wonky because of that. I'm just going to take my pointy tool and fix it. All right. So the only other thing I wanted to show you, and this is where I wanted to also point out why the guidelines matter. When you're doing a piece, you're going to have, let me come down here where I've got some shorter guidelines. You're going to have, hopefully you're going to have guidelines. So hopefully you're going to have a circle where you're starting your swoosh. The circles are usually where you start and stop things, and a circle where you're ending your swoosh. So let's say I had a dot. Just throw a dot in here. Let's say I had a dot here. Yeah, that's not how I want to do it. I need more circles. That's why on my pieces I do a lot of circles. Let me get myself some more circles so I can show you realistically what I'm talking about. So bear with me just a minute. I usually put my circles about 1/2 centimeter apart. All right, so this is better. These horizontal lines would represent your circles. All right, so if I had, let's say, a dot here, then I would look at it before I even start my swoosh, and I would say, okay, I'm going to start all my swooshes on this line, and I want them all to end on this line. I think this is a big problem for those of you that are struggling with consistency in the length of your swooshes. I think it's a guideline issue. You need more circles. Put a lot of circular guidelines. Don't just follow the stencil. Get out your compass and load it up with circles. Not the same as your vertical lines. Those are different, and we can talk about guidelines in another lesson. All right, so I'm going to start at this guideline and I'm going to end at that guideline. And again, when I go to end, if I can tell that my tail is going to be thick, I'm going to lift up and finish it with my pointing tool. And I want it to wrap under my dot. All right, same thing over here. Start in the same guideline and go the one below. And same if you were to continue making swooshes, like if you wanted to do a lotus petal, you just keep staying on the same guideline. And then pointy tool to refine the edge a little bit. And then if you want to start getting shorter, because you want to make like a blooming flower, a flower that's just opening up, but this guideline right here is too short, then you go, okay, I want to go halfway between these two guidelines. So you would start there and swoosh. And the key is now I do the exact same thing for the other side and every other one of those that I do. So you can get a bud that's opening. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you, because it came up today with somebody, is, and I don't have a piece that has this on it. They're all, I've gotten rid of all of them. You may have seen a border. When I say border, I don't just mean on the outer edge, but maybe I would have could put it like here to border before I start the next. Sorry, maybe I could put it here to border before I start the next thing. But one option is just rows of dots, which is the simplest, but you may have seen something that looks like this, where you've got and then it's going the other way. Flip-flop swooshes. And you're doing this all the way around the board. Very tedious and time consuming. But how you do that, because you're not going to want to have to drag out your pointy tool all the time for something that's going to it's going to take a whole lot of time to do that. You want to have your swooshes so that they are okay just with the ball stylus. How I do it is I always use the white tool, and with whatever the one color is, I do all my downward ones. I make sure that I have a guideline to start and a guideline to stop. If I don't, I will take my compass and make another circular guideline there so that I do. Even if that means messing up my center dot, I'll just redot my center dot. Sometimes I don't even do my center dot until the end because of that kind of thing. But you do all one color first and get a feel. Your first few that one doesn't have a great tail. Your first few you'll get used to. Go all the same direction and leave a little bit of space in between, probably about, I don't know, enough room for another swoosh to go there. But the goal is to have them all the same length. So it'll take you a few to get where you start cruising with them and you're like, okay, I know what pressure, I know what how much paint, I know the speed. So you go all the way around the board like that. This one I probably would have not been able to resist taking my pointy tool and extending it a little bit. And then once you're done, you come back to the beginning where you started, which they should be dry by now, and you go in between either with the same white tool or maybe depending on how much space you've left between, you might need to go down a tool size to the pink tool to squeeze in your flops to your flips. So now we're just going the opposite direction. So that's how you make one of those flip-flop swish borders. Some artists can really get these perfect. I used to do them a lot, but it takes so long, especially on like a 24-inch board and I'm on the outer edge of it doing them. Yeah. All right, guys. I hope that helps. Please practice. Draw some guidelines. Consider getting some MDF boards. Let me know if you need the link. And share your work with me either through private message if you don't want to share it publicly, or just in our little student group. That would be amazing. I can help you better that way. Have a great day. Bye bye.